Hi, my name is Susie from the Department of English Language and Literature at Yonsei University, and in this video I will be talking about pragmatics, which is a relatively understudied area of linguistics. Before we go into the details, first let's imagine that you heard the following sentence. It's really hot in here. How would you interpret this? It could simply be, in the most literal sense, an observation on the temperature of the room. Or maybe you're the person sitting next to a window and it's the hottest day of summer. In this context, the comment would be a request asking you to open the window. Could it also mean something else? What if it was the middle of winter and your roommate says this as she walks into your room? You would probably take it as an indirect way of saying, "You're wasting too much electricity." As this example shows, a single utterance could have so many diverse meanings depending on who said it, where they said it, and in which context it was spoken. Pragmatics is interested in this disparity between what people say and what they actually mean. In the sentence we just saw, the literal meaning stays identical, but the meaning in use can have so many possibilities. So, how do we arrive at the actual intended meaning? What are the different functions and meanings an utterance can take? This is where pragmatics comes in. But you might be wondering, if this is the case, why has pragmatics received so little attention until now? Well, Noam Chomsky, who's often considered to be one of the founding figures of modern linguistics, established theoretical linguistics as a form of science, where language is seen as a formal, isolated system in its own right. Under the Chomskyan paradigm, core components of linguistics included subfields such as phonology, morphology, syntax, and semantics, but pragmatics was often left out. To Chomsky, language sciences did not include pragmatic factors such as context because it would be incredibly difficult to define, quantify, and analyze the role of such external features of language. This view is also well noted in a paper by Bar Hillel in 1971. He said to be more careful with forcing bits and pieces you find in the pragmatic wastebasket into your favorite syntactico-semantic theory. Simply put, pragmatics was reduced to a so-called wastebasket containing anything that did not belong in the formal system of language. However, as we've seen in the previous example, semantics and syntax are not quite enough when the form and intended meaning of the speaker don't match. And that's why here we'll be discussing one simple example or theory of pragmatics that attempt to explain such phenomena. So we'll be looking at speech check theory by J.L. Austin, which tries to answer the question of what functions can utterances have other than their literal meaning. Austin initially suggested the performative hypothesis, where he argued that there are two types of utterances. Constatives are declarative statements for which it is possible to identify their truth conditional meaning. They are often descriptions about the state of affairs and are facts or information about the world we live in. For example, sentences such as, "Her name is Elizabeth and my neighbors next door got married," would be in this category. Performatives, on the other hand, are utterances for which it is impossible to determine the truth condition because they are used to carry out an action instead. As they are actions, they usually bring about an actual change in the state of affairs. For example, if I say, "I named this cat Elizabeth," it would no longer be appropriate to call the cat by any other name. If a pastor says, "I pronounce you husband and wife" while officiating a wedding, the man and woman become a married couple. As performatives have such special effects, it is also possible to characterize the grammatical properties of performatives. First, I promise you that I will return is a performative because it's making the act of promise, but she promises to come back is an observation for which it is possible to determine whether it's true. This is a causative. Therefore, performatives should be in first person. Next, I plead not guilty is an action of pleading, and thus this is a performative, but I pleaded not guilty is just a description of what happened in the past. Therefore, this is a causative sentence. Performatives should be in present tense. Another way to distinguish performatives from causatives is the insertion of hereby. It is natural to insert the adverb hereby in performatives because the action is taking place right now. An example would be, I hereby sentence you to 10 years of jail as spoken by a judge in court. However, if you insert hereby in a causative, it sounds unnatural. If you look at the sentence above, I hereby pleaded not guilty, sounds very ungrammatical. Therefore, the insertion of hereby is another criteria with which we can discern whether an utterance is a performative. However, Austin soon noticed that there are instances in which this distinction between causatives and performatives are not so clear-cut. For instance, if someone says, I warn you this gun is loaded, in order for it to work as a performative and become an actual warning, the sentence must also be true, because the gun should actually be loaded. So, truth conditions are not always irrelevant to performatives. Austin thus decided that instead of categorizing all utterances into either causatives or performatives, any utterance can be seen as undertaking some sort of action or force, which can be then analyzed into three aspects. This is what he called the speech act theory. So in every speech act, there are three forces: the locutionary act, the illocutionary act, and the perlocutionary act. The locutionary act is the act of delivering meaning of an utterance and is very closely related to the traditional sense of meaning. This can be thus interpreted through phonemes, morphemes, words, and sentences. Most simply put, this is the literal meaning of an utterance. The illocutionary act is the intended action that is achieved through the locutionary act. Some examples include request, apology, and promise. It is interesting to note here that different locutionary acts may achieve the same illocutionary act. For instance, if someone says, could you pass me the milk? Or, pass me the milk, please, they are considered to be different locutionary acts as they are different sentences. However, they both have the same illocutionary act of requesting. Lastly, perlocutionary act is the effect of the utterance on its hearer. How does the hearer respond? Examples of the perlocutionary act include rejecting offers or accepting an apology. For Austin, the most important force out of these three was the illocutionary act because this is the main action that is being realized by uttering a sentence. As it is stated in the collection of his lectures, How to Do Things with Words, our interest in these lectures is essentially to fasten on the second illocutionary act and contrast it with the other two. Now let's look at an actual example. In this conversation, what are the locutionary, illocutionary, and perlocutionary acts of Jack's utterance? I take it back, that was very inconsiderate of me. If we take a brief look at the context, It seems that Lara is offended by something that Jack has previously said by her, which can be seen in her utterance, "How could you say that?" So here, if we focus on Jack, the locutionary act is the actual semantic meaning of the words. So in his sentence, "I take it back," it must refer to something he previously said, and he's trying to take it back as he thought it was inappropriate. The locutionary act that he is aiming for here is an apology, as he seems to be regretting something he said earlier. The perlocutionary act can only be understood through Laura's reaction, and she seems to be grudgingly accepting Jack's apology through the phrase, "At least you admit it." Austen classified the elocutionary forces into 5 different types, which are verdictives, exercitives, commissives, behabitives, and expositives. So, verdictives are a way of delivering a finding based on evidence. Examples of this include acquit, convict, and rule. Exercitives are a way of exercising power or influence. So, types of this elocutionary force include appoint and dismiss. Commissives are a way of committing to a future course of action, and a well known example is a promise or the act of promising. Behabitives are a way of expressing reactions and attitudes to others' behavior, and examples include apologize, thank, and congratulate. Lastly, expositives are a way of making clear how what is being said fits into its context, and some examples include deny, swear, and testify. As can be seen here, there are so many different actions that can be achieved through a single utterance. And Austen's theories are therefore very effective in that they show that language is not just used to describe facts about the world, but rather it is a useful tool carrying out many complex functions even in our daily interactions. So here I've briefly introduced just one theory in the field of pragmatics, but I want to finish off this video by mentioning the communication iceberg, which is a very interesting concept introduced in the book The Language Game by Christiansen and Chater. So in this theoretical iceberg, what should go in the tip of the iceberg? Well, according to the authors, words, phrases, or sentences, or in other words, the components of theoretical linguistics only make up the tip of the iceberg. Under the iceberg, in the hidden parts, there are so many elements, pragmatic elements, that help us understand the real meaning behind an utterance. They include factual knowledge, values, social roles, customs, norms, unspoken rules, empathy, collaboration, and culture. So, in order to really reach the message that the other person is trying to convey, we must be able to make use of all of this pragmatic knowledge under the imaginary iceberg, which once again emphasizes the importance and magnitude of pragmatic knowledge. The authors of this book put this in a more eloquent way by saying that for language science to work at all, for us to make sense of what is said, we also need the hidden, submerged part of the communication iceberg. Without it, our ability to communicate would sink into unintelligibility. So this is it for today, and thank you for listening.